everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com back again with more wrestling news. Tom has done a news video earlier on today, of course, and now we are here with our second news video. Some of it concerns last night's Raw, and check out Tom's graded if you want to know how good last night's Raw was, so it's all good. Happy days indeed. Now, let's take a look at those headlines. First of all, a former champion in WWE could be training for a return to in-ring action soon. Next up, we take a look at the explanation behind a weird, botched sort of looking finish on last night's Raw and a possible injury on top of that. And finally, we have an update on Ivar's condition and how long he could be out of action after also sustaining an injury. So yes, first of all, a former champion could be returning to in-ring action in WWE. Why do we think that? Well, she has been training, and it's none other than former Raw Women's Champion, Ronda Rousey. It seems like so long ago now that Ronda was at the top of her game in WWE, and it seemed like she really helped propel WWE to a bit of a hot streak, certainly at least in the context of modern times. Her rivalry with Becky Lynch was the hottest thing in WWE at that point and did a lot for the company, and of course did loads for women's wrestling. And even though she wasn't the most liked person when she left WWE, she'd obviously turned heel, and fans were starting to get a bit sick of maybe her Twitter antics and her shoot comments and that sort of thing. I think that in her absence, we've all kind of realised maybe a little bit what we're missing with Ronda not being around. Well, Ronda was recently back inside the squared circle, a training ring in fact, training with former WWE star JTG, one half of Crime Time of course, and also Roddy Piper's daughter Teal. This information was via Teal's own Instagram page, and she noted that she'd been out for 6 months reconstructing her knee after tearing her ACL and meniscus, and was now back in the ring training, but also Ronda Rousey was there too. This was the first known training that Ronda Rousey has taken part in since she was wrestling, since WrestleMania 35, which was of course the site of her last match with WWE, losing to Becky Lynch in the main event of WrestleMania, and also Charlotte Flair was there too, dropping the SmackDown Women's title, Ronda dropped the Raw Women's title, and Becky Lynch proudly held both belts at the end of the night. So yeah, it would be interesting if Ronda was to come back to WWE, wouldn't it? I think this could maybe, if she even is considering this could maybe be more of a long-term thing, one for not so much the near future, but the middle or long-term future, because, I mean, at the moment, there's no fans, of course, and if Ronda was to return, the most impact would be had if it was in front of a live audience, of course. And also, if Ronda was to come back, because she's such a big name and a big star, I don't think WWE would be bringing her back around this time of year. I think they'd be waiting until, Mania season, or failing that, the Rumble leading into Mania, if that makes sense. Now, let's move on to last night's Monday Night Raw, where, of course, Mickie James took on Asuka for the Raw Women's Championship, a match that started off well. Both women were great. Mickie James looked as sharp as ever, Asuka was as great as ever, but then the finish was really weird. The finish came, it's kind of weird if you've seen it. Asuka has Mickie locked in the Asuka lock. Mickie flips backwards while on the canvas into almost like a pinning predicament, but not really, because Asuka's shoulders still sort of off the canvas, and the ref sort of takes a look at it as Mickie's kind of caught in this Asuka lock but round on her knees now, and then the referee just waves it off. Now, nothing has officially been mentioned by WWE regarding this strange finish. It just was the end of the match. Everyone looked a little bit confused. Mickie James herself looked a little bit confused. It was a strange one. But Mick Foley has tweeted a possible explanation. Foley's tweet reads this: I'm hearing that Mickie James may have injured her shoulder in tonight's Raw match, which would explain the quick ending to the match. If true, I'm wishing Mickie a quick and complete recovery and hoping she gets another shot at the title. Sentiments, of course, echoed by ourselves here at Cultaholic. If she is injured, we'd like to wish her a speedy recovery. Again, yeah, that's not been confirmed by WWE officially or anything, but if Mickie is injured, it will be very unfortunate timing, because of course she has only recently made her return to the product after, well, suffering an injury herself, which kept her on the shelf for quite a number of months, and then having to sit out even longer just because of the constraints of the pandemic and WWE not having too many wrestlers in the Performance Center. If there is any good news or reassuring news, it's that Mickie's last injury was not a shoulder injury, so if this one is indeed a shoulder injury, if Foley's theory is true, then at least it's not linked to her previous injury, which was to her ACL. Next up, unfortunately, it is more injury news as we talk about Ivar of the Viking Raiders, who of course recently sustained an injury during a 6-man tag team match on Monday Night Raw. Not this week's Raw, previous week's Raw. Well, Brian Alvarez reported on a recent episode of Wrestling Observer Live that Ivar will be undergoing neck surgery in Birmingham, Alabama today. Now that I think about it, it says in my notes here that it was during an 8-man tag team match. It was a multi-man tag team match. Ivar sustained an injury, and then the match was kind of almost rushed to a finish, it may have looked like, when Cedric Alexander pinned Ricochet. In fact, just to clarify, I think the match was Ivar and Eric teaming with Ricochet and Apollo Crews against all 4 members of the Hurt Business. Yes, that was it, against MVP, Lashley, Shelton Benjamin, and of course the newest member, the recently turned Cedric Alexander. Ivar sent out a message on social media last Tuesday thanking everyone for the support he's received. I'll just read that in full now because it's relevant. From the bottom of my heart, thank you to every single friend, family and fan who has reached out to me. My heart is truly touched from all the love and support. Still figuring it all out, but I'm working hard to recover and be better than ever. Love you all. And it goes without saying that, of course, we would have wished Ivar a speedy recovery anyway, but it's looking like he could be on the shelf for quite some time, so hopefully it's as quick a recovery as it possibly can be. Neck surgery, of course, means that he's not going to be returning quickly to in-ring action. In fact, Dave Meltzer has suggested that Ivar could be out for about a year, because that seems to be the sort of time frame for this type of neck surgery, and that seems to be the length of time before a wrestler indeed returns to the ring. So we could be going without seeing Ivar for quite some time, and I guess that also raises the question of what's going to happen to his tag partner, Eric of the Viking Raiders. As always, when a tag team is split for whatever reason or is temporarily put on hold, there is a chance for the other member of the tag team to go on a bit of a singles run. I don't know if we'll see it with Eric. I don't know. It all depends on whether WWE sees Eric as the sort of viable contender for a singles push. Personally, in my mind, I would love to see it. I think Eric's fantastic, and I think that, even without Ivar backing him up in the Viking Raiders, I still think he could be a great singles superstar. However, once again, it all just depends on what WWE sees him as. But hopefully Ivar does return quickly, and even if he is away for a long time, hopefully Eric finds something valuable to do in WWE. Of course, we saw this happen with the AOP, who were both out at different times with injuries, keeping the other one on the shelf as well, and they were recently released by WWE. A very sad story for both Akam and Razor, and hopefully the Viking Raiders can get back on track as quickly as they possibly can. Next up, let's stick with the Wrestling Observer for a little while, because on the latest edition of Wrestling Observer Radio, Dave Meltzer told the story, which was then shared about on Reddit and places like that, about why Rusev was not allowed after a while to have a first name when he was in WWE, because remember, he wasn't Rusev from the start. When he was coming up, he was very much Alexander Rusev. Well, according to Meltzer, apparently Vince McMahon did not want the Alexander part in Rusev's name, because then he thought that people would start to call him Alex, and that did not sound like a heel name to Vince. Also, apparently, again according to Meltzer, the same thing happened to Cesaro, who was of course Antonio Cesaro, but then Vince was worried that people would start calling him Tony, and then they cheer him because of that and not treat him like a proper heel, I guess. Meltzer says that apparently what was said at a meeting a few years ago about Rusev's name was, Vince goes, we gotta drop that first name. If we call him Alexander Rusev, people are gonna start calling him Alex, and Alex is not a good name for a heel. I don't understand why that wouldn't work. I don't know. I think if someone's called Alexander Rusev, if you shorten it, you're just going to call him Rusev, surely. That's the most striking part of that name. But anyway, I don't know. Vince, obviously, as we all know, has a weird aversion sometimes to full names. Sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes he forgets. Sometimes it's fine for somebody not to have their full name. Sometimes it's fine for somebody to be known by both parts. It just seems to be luck of the draw if you're a WWE superstar, whether you're going to get that name changed or not. Alvarez then asked, well, why did Vince McMahon not drop his own first name if he thought that was the case? But it was then pointed out that, of course, Vince McMahon did kind of drop his first name, because during the Attitude Era, when it was all kicking off between him and Austin, he was often referred to as Mr. McMahon. And finally, the latest figure to cross the line, cross that divide, the Wednesday Night Wars divide between WWE and AEW, has been revealed, because eagle-eyed people watching last night's Raw may have seen a certain familiar face from AEW on Raw Underground. We've seen huge names cross this divide already. Jon Moxley, Rusev, or Miro as he is now known, of course. Mike Chioda, for example. But now we've seen somebody go the other way, and it's Pineapple Pete. Pineapple Pete, of course, is better known to fans of his on the independent scene as Sugar Dunkerton of places like Chikara, for example. He very recently spent a stint in England, also wrestling for a variety of different promotions around here, especially in the north. I saw him on a couple of occasions. Fantastic wrestler, of course. But he hasn't been seen on AEW since that mini little feud he had with Chris Jericho, which did wonders for his stock, by the way, I imagine, even though, of course, in the end, Jericho picked up the victory. Now, Sugar Dunkerton, or Shug D as he is sometimes known as well, or Pineapple Pete, as Jericho christened him, has appeared in multiple tag team matches on Dark during the lockdown era of professional wrestling and everything, but also he's now on Raw Underground. He was spotted last night in the crowd, so he didn't get onto the ring, the combat area, and he didn't take part in any brawl or anything, but he was there in the crowd and has since confirmed indeed that he was there on Twitter. He joked that he went there to see Isaiah Swerve Scott, I'm assuming the two of them are friends, but ran into somebody else instead, Shane McMahon. And I should point out as well that if you want to hear more about Pineapple Pete / Sugar Dunkerton, then you can check out his Desert Island Graps episode, and check out all of Tom's wonderful Desert Island Graps episodes. If you're unfamiliar with the concept, Tom interviews a wrestler or a figure within wrestling, I've done one as well, and he asks for their 3 favourite matches of all time. And then it becomes an interview about the person and their likes, their dislikes, their history, all that sort of thing. It's a really good series. If you've never listened to it, check out Tom's Desert Island Graps. And that's it for this news video. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Jack from Cultaholic.com. Leave your thoughts and opinions on any of these stories in that comment section down below. Stay safe out there, stay positive, and I'll see you very soon.